Hi guys, welcome back or welcome to my channel if you're new here. Please subscribe to my channel just because it would really help me out, and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it. Wait till the end if you want to. So yeah, let's just dive straight into this. So as you can tell from the title of this video, I am going to be talking about what it is like to live with extreme OCD, otherwise known as obsessive compulsive disorder. So when people think about OCD, they tend to think about people who are really tidy, or who clean a lot, who clean their hands a lot, who have to have things in a certain way. And for some people that is what it is. For other people it has, like myself, my OCD had nothing to do with germs, cleanliness, anything like that. So yeah, I'm gonna start at the very beginning. I could literally make like a 2-hour video of this, but I'm very aware that that would be very boring, so I'm gonna try and keep things short and succinct. Yeah. So I have always been a very anxious person. Even as a baby, I couldn't be left alone for literally a minute. As soon as my parents left the room, I would start screaming, and I was a very anxious child as well. And anxiety, yeah, it can be genetic, it can be hereditary, it can also be environmental. And I think for me it is definitely genetic, but then environmental factors made it an awful lot worse. So I had an amazing childhood. You know, I had two parents who loved me very much. I had friends, I had grandparents, and then when I was about 3 years old, my mum's mum, my granny, was diagnosed with cancer. A very rare form of cancer called spinal chordoma, which is where the tumour wraps itself around the spinal cord. And essentially it was inoperable, and there was nothing that they could really do about it. So from about the age of 3 up until she died when I was about 8, she was constantly in and out of hospital, constantly, and there would be times where she would be looking after me, and I would have to call an ambulance because she either collapsed or she would start coughing up blood, and it was really traumatic. And it's really important to know that my granny was like my mum. I spent probably the same amount of time with her as I did with my mum. We were super close, and it made me very anxious about not being around the people that I loved. So going to school was a nightmare because I'd be terrified that I would come home and someone would have been taken to hospital, or something bad would have happened to my parents or to my granny or someone else that I loved, and it just caused a lot of separation anxiety. Now, the only thing of OCD that I can remember prior to it really kicking in, I must have been about 5, and I remember I was eating something and I had to chew the same amount of number of times on one side of my mouth and then the other side of my mouth, and I don't know why, and I only did it like that one night, and then nothing OCD wise happened until after my granny died. So I did have some sort of, that was like the beginning of my brain trying to come up with a coping mechanism, I think, to the anxiety that I was feeling. So my granny passed away when I was 8 years old. Again, very traumatic. She went into hospital because she started coughing up blood, and then she was in hospital and she was fine. She was going to come home, and then she caught a hospital bug. I'm not going to go into that whole thing because I think that's a very separate topic, but basically she passed away and I was there when they had to switch off the machine because she was on life support, and that was very traumatic for me, but I wanted to be there, and my parents thought it was really important that I was there, and I'm looking back on it, I am glad that I was there in her final moments, because it gives me some sort of sense of comfort to know that I was with her. So fast forward to about a year later, and we went back home to Bermuda for a holiday. My mum is from Bermuda, and that night that we arrived is the night that my OCD started, and I don't really understand why my brain chose that place or that time, but basically I remember we were driving in the cab to my granddad's house, and I just recently watched the film Atlantis, you know, the film where a huge tidal wave comes over, and Bermuda is a very tropical country, and it kind of reminded me of what Atlantis might have been like. Bearing in mind I was only like 9 years old at the time, and I was terrified that a tidal wave would come and wipe out Bermuda, and I kept on looking at things, and I would have to think of a positive thing whilst looking at something and breathing on that thing. I know how crazy this sounds looking back on it, but for anyone who has OCD, in that moment you don't realise how crazy you sound. I don't mean the word crazy as in a bad thing, but it sounds so ridiculous is what I mean. So I'd have to think about something positive or looking at something, but if I am breathing on it, but if I looked at something and, for example, thought of the tidal wave and breathed in or breathed out onto that object, then I believed that bad thing would happen. So that is the first time that my OCD happened. So I don't really remember when the time period between the OCD happening and me telling my mum. I think it must have been a couple of months, because I was starting to get really anxious about it, because I was like, this is weird, this isn't normal, this is odd what I'm doing, you know, breathing onto objects whilst looking at them, thinking about positive thoughts and being scared if I think of a negative thought. I knew that it wasn't normal. So, and I was really scared to tell my mum, because I thought, oh my gosh, she's going to say that I'm insane, she's going to send me somewhere, or that I'm really ill, or they're going to have to do, I was just really scared. So I told my mum about it, and she really reassured me. She said, you know what, I had the same sort of thing when I was your age. Like, if I hit my right leg by accident, I then have to hit my left leg to make myself feel better, to even out. And I specifically remember the sentence that she said. She said, oh, don't worry, all little kiddywinks have these things. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe it's not that bad, it's not that big a deal. Yeah, so that kind of made me feel a bit better, but I did still continue with my OCD thoughts, my OCD actions, and I started to get really bad panic attacks every night when I went to bed. And it got to the point where my parents were like, okay, I think maybe we should take you to see a counsellor, because this has probably been brought on by your granny's death. Let's just go see, maybe they can give you some sort of tools to help you. So I went to therapy. I absolutely hated it so much, because it felt like school. I just hated it. I think I had about 6 sessions, and the main thing that they did diagnose me with OCD, but the main thing that they wanted to help with was the panic attacks. I think they thought that if they helped with the anxiety and the panic attacks, that would help ease my anxiety in general, and I wouldn't have to do any OCD rituals. So they gave me like exercises to do, like grounding, things like that. If you don't know what grounding is, it's where you have to try and really put yourself in the moment. Like, okay, I am sitting here, I can feel this on my body, I can feel clothes on my skin, I can see that over there. What can you smell? What can you hear? And it like brings you back to the moment. And it's a great technique. I was just too young to really take it on board. So I did the therapy, and my panic attacks did go, but I'm not sure whether that was the therapy or whether I just grew out of them. and my OCD was still going on, and it was getting progressively worse, but I didn't tell anyone about it because I thought that I could deal with it by myself. So from the ages of about 10 to, I want to say 12, maybe even less than that, my OCD really started to get bad again. Well, it never got much better, but it really started to get bad. And I used to be very good at hiding it, but my mum and dad started to notice. Like, they would see me walking in and out of doorways, they'd see me tapping things, they would see me staring at things because I was really trying to concentrate on thinking of a positive thing rather than a negative thing. And so when I was, I want to say 12, they took me to the GP again and basically we told them what was going on, and they referred me to a specialist OCD clinic. And we had, from the ages of about 12 till 18, that whole 6 years I was in therapy. We had family therapy sessions. I had 4 different therapists. Yeah, it was a fun time. Yeah, and it was really hard. And when I was 14, because I was not getting any better, they asked if I wanted to be put on medication. Now, I know some people are really opposed to giving children or adolescents medication because you've got so many different hormones going on in your body anyway. But for me, it was the last resort because I felt like I was going insane, actually insane. So they put me on medication when I was 14, and I was on it all the way up until I was 21, and then I gradually came off of it then. So as I said, I was in therapy all of my teenage years, so I didn't really get to be a typical teenager. So my parents are very lucky in that way. They didn't have a horrible moody teenager or anything like that. They just had a very exceptionally anxious teenager who just, looking back on it now, I feel so sorry for the person that I was, because I was a mess. So to give you an example, my OCD affected every single thing that I did, from blinking to breathing to writing to eating, what I looked at, what I thought about. Writing, oh my gosh, writing was so difficult. I would write something, and if I had written it whilst thinking about something that I didn't necessarily want to think about, I would have to retrace over the words that I'd written thinking about something positive, and if I didn't do that, I'd have to do it again. So my schoolwork sort of was very, very messy, and I was in a constant state of anxiety. The worst things, having showers, that was really difficult. I would constantly be turning the shower on and off. I think I broke the shower about 3 times. Sorry, mum and dad. Getting in and out of bed, that was hard. That was hard. I'm not exaggerating when I say I would spend about 3 hours trying to get into bed. Not like my nighttime routine or anything like that, literally standing at the edge of my bed trying to get into my bed. That was my night routine all throughout my teenage years. And it got so bad that my parents would have to pin me down in my bed to stop me from getting out. And they would have to sit in the corner of the room until I fell asleep so that I wouldn't get out of my bed. And that sounds horrific, but I'm glad that they did, because otherwise I would have just been so tired all the time. Another thing that I found really hard was getting dressed. I'm not talking about like picking out what to wear or things like that. I mean the physical action of putting on clothes. I like putting my legs into the trousers. I would spend about sometimes an hour just trying to put on a pair of trousers, putting my leg in and out, putting on underwear, and I would just be sat in my room screaming because I was so frustrated that I just couldn't switch my brain off, and I would just be crying my eyes out on the floor because I was just so tired. I just wanted my brain to shush for 5 minutes. Yeah, and I always found it, the way I describe it, having a mental health illness, is that if you have a physical ailment, you can see it, or you can have a scan if it's inside your body and you can see that it's there. You can cut out, you know, a tumour. You can do things like that. You can't do that when you have a mental health issue, because it's you, it's part of you, it's part of your brain, and that's what really scared me, was that this was me, and having to try and separate the OCD part of me to Tiffany, when it's like a very toxic best friend. You know it's bad for you, you know that it's lying to you, but it also brings you comfort. So like when you do the ritual and you get it just right till when it makes you feel right, it's like, oh, okay, the anxiety's gone, but it causes you more anxiety than it's worth because you're constantly trying to do these rituals. So what you have to learn, what I had to learn, was to deal and accept the anxiety, and that is the most difficult thing to do. I know it is, believe me, I know. I would spend hours screaming, crying on the floor, trying to get into bed, trying to get dressed, trying to brush my teeth, getting in and out of the shower, rewriting homework which should have taken me 20 minutes, it would take me 5 hours to do. Typing, oh my gosh, typing. I would literally write an entire essay, save it so that I had it, and then delete it all and retype it out until it felt just right. It was awful. It was awful. So, as I said, I was put on medication when I was 14, and the first few weeks it was like a miracle. I was like, oh my gosh, my anxiety's gone, and I could walk up the stairs again. Walking up the stairs used to take me hours to walk upstairs to get to bed. Not even just to get to bed, just to walk up the stairs. And I remember the first time I did it, and I walked up 2 steps without even thinking about it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a miracle drug. But of course you get used to it, and it dulls the anxiety, it dulls the bad thoughts, it dulls everything, but also dulls the positive thoughts, so you're just kind of a bit numb. So in my teenage years I was just very numb, which wasn't great, but it did help in some respects. So one of the worst times in my life was after I left school. Now I've realised that my OCD gets a lot worse when there's a big change, and my OCD is all about change. I don't want things to change. So it started because my granny died, and that was a huge life change, and I couldn't deal with that without, I'm a control freak and I have to be in control, and my brain's way of coping with that was to be in control of every other thing in my life because I couldn't control death. I'm gonna cry. It was a really hard time, and I remember the worst time where I genuinely thought I was going insane. I just finished school. I was 18, and we were on holiday in Bermuda, and we were walking down a beach, and we got to the end of the beach, me and my mum, and she was like, okay, we better walk back. And I said, no, I can't, I have to stay here. I've got to do, I can't even remember what it was exactly. It was some sort of thing, I had to like breathe or something, and yeah. And I stood there on that beach by myself, because the way that my parents were taught to help me was to just leave me alone with it, because them trying to help wasn't going to help, it's just going to make me more anxious. So my mum left me on the end of this beach, and I was there for about half an hour by myself, and then my dad came along, and I kid you not, he had to drag me back to the car. And that was really hard. The lowest and most embarrassing point that my OCD has ever caused me was when we were in Bermuda, and I couldn't get dressed. Like, actually couldn't get dressed. We were going out for dinner, I think, and it took me 2 hours to put my underwear on, and it was like half an hour until we had to be at the restaurant. And bearing in mind my granddad, who we were visiting in Bermuda, he had no idea that I had OCD. He was a very proud man, he didn't quite understand mental health, and he would have seen it as a weakness. So it got to about half an hour before we were going, and my dad knocked on the door and was like, Tiff, are you ready? And I was just in a crumpled heap on the floor, crying my eyes out because I couldn't get dressed. And he said, okay, if you don't get dressed in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to come in there and I'm going to dress you myself. My mum had already previously tried to, but by this point I was a lot stronger physically than my mum, but not stronger than my dad. And that was the lowest point of my life up until that point, because no 18-year-old girl wants their dad to have to come in and dress them. And he said, okay, I'm closing my eyes, I'm coming in, I'm going to dress you. So he had to come in the room, and he closed his eyes, and my mum came in as well, and my mum was holding me so that I wouldn't struggle, and my dad had to literally put my clothes on me, and it was so embarrassing and mortifying. But I also feel so bad for my parents that they had to go through that, because it was just awful, absolutely awful what I put them through, and the stress that I caused everyone was horrific. I couldn't help it because I was ill, very, very, very ill, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so close to my parents, is because without them I don't know how I'd be here today. I genuinely don't know how I would have coped throughout life, throughout that whole period without them. So when you turn 18 in the UK and you are under a mental health organisation, you can only stay there until you're 18. Ridiculous, I know. So I turned 18, they were like, okay, see ya. And then you have to go to adult therapy if you do want it. So I had about a year where I didn't have any therapy, and it wasn't getting any better. I went to 6 sessions with one therapist, and I just didn't really click with her. And then my OCD was getting worse and worse throughout university, and I was really struggling. And then I got in a relationship with someone at university, and he was my best friend, absolutely, you know, loved him to bits. And my OCD got worse, if that was even possible, when I got into this relationship, because my brain kept on making me doubt my feelings, and so my OCD was scared that my feelings for my boyfriend would change, so I would do everything I could to make my OCD was all about doing rituals and thinking that I was in love with him. And if I thought about something and thought about the word not in love or the word platonic whilst thinking about his face, I was scared that I would not love him anymore. And that's kind of what my OCD was. It was like pictures and words in my head, and if I thought about like an evil person, like let's just for example Hitler, if I thought about Hitler's face whilst moving or something, I was scared that I was going to become like that person, like I would become a horrible person and do horrible things. But if I thought about a good person or good words, I would embody those things. And it was all just about being scared of change. And so in my relationship, I was terrified that I was not going to be in love with him anymore. So I would constantly do stuff to make sure, my OCD was all about making sure that I was in love with him. So at this point I went to another therapist, and she really helped me, actually, really helped me. One of the things that she explained to me was that you're doing these things because you know that you love this person, but your brain is trying to test you to think that you don't. It's because you love this person so much that you're so terrified to lose them. And that really helped my anxiety, because I was like, oh, it's not that I'm not in love with him, it's that I love him so much that I'm scared that I won't be. So that helped me a lot. And my OCD did get better throughout like the last year and a half of university, definitely. It then got worse again when I left university. Again, another huge life change. And I just didn't know what I was doing with my life, so it did get worse. But then it got a little bit better the year after university, like after I left. So one of the things that really helped me, one of the tactics that they gave me, was that they told me that, you know, you can't die from anxiety. You can't die from it. You think that you're just going to, the anxiety is just going to go up and up and up and up and up till you explode. It doesn't work like that. Anxiety has to come down. And so one of the exercises that they gave me throughout my teenage years was to, if I did something, I had to pick like one thing, like, okay, walking through a doorway or getting out of the shower, and I had to not do my OCD or try my best not to. And I would have to write down the action and rate the anxiety from 1 being the lowest to 10 the highest, how I felt in that moment. And I'd have to time myself, and then a minute later I'd have to do the same thing, 5 minutes later do the same thing, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour. And the idea of it was to see that your anxiety does go down, and that really helped me. I was very stubborn about most of my therapy, I'm not gonna lie, because I was like, nothing's gonna help me, I'm doomed forever, blah blah blah. But that was one thing that really did help me personally. And the medication, not gonna lie, the medication really did help, really helped. So, the reason I wanted to make this video, I've wanted to talk about this for a long time because it has been my entire life. It's like this other half of me that I dealt with. And for the past 2 years, my OCD has pretty much been under control. Throughout lockdown, it has got a little bit worse, but nowhere near to the extent that it was previously. Nowhere near. I'm managing with it now. But I wanted to make this video because, especially in my case, I was very good at hiding my OCD, very good. My friends didn't know, my teachers didn't know, my family didn't know, apart from my mum and dad. And to everyone else I came across as this lovely, happy, isn't life amazing, my life's wonderful person. And people were genuinely shocked when they found out that I was going through all this. And I think that's the case with a lot of mental health issues. You don't know what people are going through. And I think that some people still don't realise how debilitating having a mental health issue can be. You know, my OCD was my main issue, but it also caused extreme depression because I was so depressed with how I was having to live my life with this anxiety. And I want people to know that it's okay to have a mental health issue. It's okay to be terrified. It's okay to think that you're going crazy. It's okay to ask for help. And you should ask for help. I am very stubborn when it comes to a lot of things. I like to try and do it by myself to help and fix the problem myself, but sometimes you can't, and you need someone to talk to, whether that is your friend, your parent, or a teacher, or a therapist. It's okay. There's nothing embarrassing about it. There's nothing to be ashamed about. You would ask for help if you had a physical ailment, so why not ask for help for a mental health ailment? So I hope this video has been informative and helpful to someone at least. And if you want to ask me any questions, please do in the comment section. If you want to message me directly on Instagram or Facebook, please do, and I will try my absolute best to reply to you, because I think this is something that so many people struggle with, a form of mental health issues, and we still don't talk about it as much as we should. Yeah, so that has been my very, very brief recount of my life living with extreme OCD. Please subscribe to my channel. Not all my videos are this deep, in fact hardly any of them are, but I just think it's important to show this side of me, and you know, to show people that it's okay to talk about this sort of stuff. So yeah, please subscribe to my channel and give this video a like, please, that would be great. And next video we will do something fun and exciting and upbeat and happy, and yeah, it's gonna be great. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram. Yeah, so I will see you again next time. Bye.